Fellow Rotarians, it is a great honor and joy to introduce today's keynote speaker, truly a phenomenal leader, Dr. Nathaniel Hearn. Dr. Nathaniel Hearn epitomizes what Up by the Bootstraps stands for: an educator, motivator, mentor, executive, pastor, trainer, and ultimately, the man who has led countless individuals to excel far past their expectations and their dreams. He was instrumental in combining education with athletics, much to the chagrin of some of the coaches, while earning him the love and respect of those he molded into men. Dr. Hearn played an important part in the lives of those football players and coaches who the film Friday Night Lights was all about. As assistant coach, he instilled a love of honor and sportsmanship in every team member as he led them in strength and stamina conditioning. The Permian High School team became national football champions in 1989 and state champions in 1991. And as assistant principal and then principal in the Hearst-Euless Bedford District of Texas, he turned around the discipline alternative education program for difficult students, managing it for 5 years and motivating hundreds of potential dropouts to remain in school and drop out. His dropout prevention program was recognized by Texas School Business magazine as the best prevention program in Texas in 2010. Dr. Hearn practiced what he preached. Then, by applying yourself and making the most of what God has blessed you, you could do anything and become anyone you wanted. One of 8 children raised by strong parents, he excelled in school. But like those he came to mentor, he didn't like school and wanted to drop out. But he says, you don't argue with a mom who held 2 jobs to clothe and feed you. You did what she told you to do. I can relate to that. Dr. Hearn has earned several degrees, including a Master of Divinity at SMU, while working full-time at Clarksville ISD as a football defensive coordinator and conditioning coach. The next year, he became an ordained minister and served in several churches. 2009, back at SMU, obtaining his Doctor of Ministry. Dr. Hearn's ultimate all-time challenge and success has been his dynamic presentations on leaving a legacy that will have you cheering 1 minute and crying the next. He's happily married to Callie, who is with us today and resides in Arlington, Texas. They have 5 grown children and 3 grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming a fellow Rotarian, member of the Arlington Rotary Club, Dr. Nathaniel Hearn.
We're honored to be here. It's unique, and I say we. My wife is with me, the love of my life, my soulmate, my traveling buddy. I never leave home without her. You know, we travel so much and we go so many places. There's always an interesting story about her. When we first started this, I had an agent, traveling, speaking, doing personal development. And then about 2 years later, he called me and he said, Nate, you know, you'll make a lot more money if you leave Callie at home. Then I said, James, that's not his name. Protect the innocent. I said, James, there might be some validity in that statement you just made. She's standing right here, so you can tell her that. And he goes, oh, no. I said, yeah, don't set me up. We're here to talk about membership. And the reason that I'm here is because of that young lady right there. Callie and I met her at a district meeting, Courtney. And as you know, being your president, she does not mince her words. She is straight up and poignant And I said, I like her. Thank you, Courtney, for the invitation. We're here to talk about membership. I've been around, going around the state. This makes my 7th Rotary Club that I've spoken at. And the other clubs, I don't see a lot of folks who look like me. And so the Rotary International sent out a letter about increasing the diversity of the Rotary Club membership. Peter Scott and I got together. He called me and he said he'd like to put together a committee of members, and he asked me to be the coach recruiter. So that's why I'm here today. Talk about membership, talking about recruiting more diverse members in Rotary. And I think the whole thing about this recruiting is your legacy. It's who you are. That's the biggest key in recruiting, who you are. I grew up in poverty. I'm the middle child of 8 siblings. It would have been 9. My youngest brother died at birth. My father, he worked as an attendant at a humble Ford service station on Main Street in that small West Texas community that I grew up in. You know, I see a lot of young faces in here, and I'm so sorry to say, you will never know what full service really means. You don't have a clue. My father was full service. He washed cars, he fixed flats, he pumped gas. When you pulled up to get gas, you never had to get out your car. Full service. My mom was the same way. My mom worked as a domestic. She cleaned houses for a living. She was full service too. She ironed, she cooked, she cleaned. The majority of her life. The 10 of us, my mom and my dad, we lived in a 3-room house that sit on cinder blocks. There was no hot water, no indoor bath facility in that home. Whenever my mom got ready to give us a bath, she would heat the water up on the stove and she'd pour it into a number 3 foot tub. Now, once again, I see a lot of young faces in here. You don't have a clue what a number 3 foot tub looks like. So this is a teaching moment for you. Just above my sister's head on the wall of that house, that's a number 3 foot tub. The majority of the clothes that I wore came from the homes that my mom cleaned. They were hand-me-downs. I have on my Sunday best. I'm just stepping out of church with my aunt. And if I could blow this picture up IMAX, you would see holes in the knees of those jeans. And if I could make it 3D and spin it around so you could see the backside, there would be holes in the elbows of that shirt. I had on patches that my mom had put on. I remember my older brother, he's 4 years older. He would wake me up on Saturday mornings and we would go out and we would scour the neighborhood alleys looking for the thickest cardboard we could find to cut it out to put it in the soles of our shoes to keep the heat of the pavement out in the winter. Heat of the pavement out in the summer, the water out in the cold out in the winter. Because my father didn't have the money to buy shoes on a regular basis. I remember my elementary school days vividly. They were pivotal moments in my life. I remember my mom, she'd line us up and she'd give us dry meat and bread, bologna sandwiches in a brown paper sack and 2 cents for a carton of milk. I remember walking to school with my sisters. I had one in the 6th grade and one in the 2nd grade, and I was in the 4th grade, and we walked to school every day. Walking to school with those holes in my clothes and those holes in my shoes and carry that bologna shop was the hardest thing that I ever had to do. And I complained every single step of the way. My sisters never complained. You know why? Because I'm a middle child. Yeah, you know, middle children are screwed up psychologically anyway. And walking to school with those holes in my shoes and holes in my clothes and carry that bologna shop left me with low self-esteem. And that low self-esteem reflected in every single report card that I received. Every card that I received was filled with C's, D's, and F's, more D's and F's than anything. I can never remember making an A in elementary school. I remember when I finished the 6th grade, I was bound and determined because I had had enough of the embarrassment. I was done. So in the last day of 6th grade, I ran all the way home. I ran all the way home and I burst through the kitchen door, through the front room, and my mom was in the kitchen cooking. And I ran up to her and I said, "Mom, I ain't never going, I hate school. I ain't never going back to school." My mom was cooking. She turned around, she put her hands on her hips, she looked down at me, and she just shook her head. And she turned back around and resumed what she was doing. 12 years old, you stupid. And I thought, wow, that was easy. I never have to go back to school. But you know what? You women understand with children. You know what my mom was thinking, right? Middle child. I don't have time for this right now. I didn't know how adamant my mom was about me getting an education until summer was over and that house was buzzing. First day of school, that little 3-room house buzzing with 7 kids getting ready to go to school. Somebody might have missed that 7. She had 8. Yours truly, I ain't going. I ain't going. I had pulled the covers up. I'm still in the bed until she walked in. And once again, she put her hands on her hips. She looked down at me and she hyphenated my name. She broke it in half. She said, Nathaniel. And everyone in that house knew that was a 5-alarm warning, right? And they just lined up at the door. They lined up at the door to look, and they weren't concerned about what was going to happen to me. They were looking because they wanted to laugh about it. That's how sadistic and psychotic they were. You see, my mom was the Muhammad Ali of that house. She was undefeated heavyweight champion of that house, and she never lost a bout with any of her 8 children. And I knew, with my mom standing over there looking at me with her hands on her hip, that if I didn't get up out of that bed and put my clothes on and line up and go to school with the rest of my brothers and sisters, she was getting ready to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee on my behind. So I'm up, put my clothes on, and headed off to school. 7th grade was everything I had imagined it to be. I hated it. I hated every second of it until I got out to 7th grade football. I'm lined up outside with all the other 7th graders waiting for the coaches to come out and introduce themselves. I'm one of the smallest. I'm at the end of the line, and out walks this big giant of a man, Coach Mark Wallace. And he's going down the line, and he's shaking hands. And he gets to me, and he says, "You must be Hearn." "Yes, sir." "Well, Hearn, I heard a lot of wonderful things about you." "Me?" "Hearn, I heard you were a good athlete. And Hearn, you're going to be on my team, and we're going to have a lot of fun, son, winning football games." And he smiled at me, and my heart went, whoa. I went home the first day of 7th grade walking on a cloud because, my coach had affirmed me, and that had never happened to me before. Had never happened to me before. I could not wait to get back to school the next day. As a matter of fact, I went to school early the next day. My mom asked my sisters and brothers, "Where is he at?" And they said, "He's gone." And she said, "Boy's lost his mind." On Monday, I'm threatening to beat him within an inch of his life. And on Tuesday, he's an hour early. He has lost his mind. Tuesday, I'm out at 7th grade football, and Coach Wallace is a man of his word. Puts me on his team. 2 weeks, he's getting us ready to play that first game. I become a starting running back on offense, a starting cornerback on defense, on all special teams. He never takes me off the field. And on top of that, he's got these life-impacting, transformational things he's saying and doing with me. I ain't never been coached like that before. There's an old cliche. They say when you know that they care, you'll run through brick walls for them. I would have ran through 10 brick walls for him. What he said matches what he did. I remember at age 13 playing a game for him. I'll never forget it. I am 70 years old, and I still remember that game like it was yesterday. Scored 4 touchdowns, rushed for like 280 yards, intercepted a pass on defense, ran a kickoff back. And some of you guys who have played this game, you kind of know when you do those kind of things, you have a feeling of invincibility. You are in a zone. It's a great feeling to have, but that feeling didn't compare with the feeling that I got after the game. We won the game big, and I'm standing out in the middle of the field with my teammates, and he walks through them, and he walks up to me, and he hugs me. Then he looks down at me and he says, Hearn, that was just outstanding. And then he used a phrase on me, an affirmation on me that he would use that day, that he would continue to use as long as I've known him. And he said on that day, but Hearn, son, I knew you would do this. He's a science teacher and a football coach, and his wife is also a teacher there. She's an English teacher, and they're young people, and they're always together. He steps back, she steps up, she comes up, she hugs me, and she tells me I'm wonderful, and she's beautiful. 7th grader with all those hormones raging. It took a week to wipe that silly grin off my face. You know, I remember leaving my 5th period class, and I would sprint. I would run as hard as I could across that field to try to get into the field house. I wanted to beat my teammates. I wanted to beat them into that field house because I didn't want that embarrassment. I was sick of that embarrassment. I wanted to get out of my clothes, out of those holes. I had holes in everything. I had holes in my socks, my underwear, my t-shirts, everything. And I wanted to beat them, especially the guys that lockered next to me. I wanted to beat them. I wanted to get in my uniform before they saw that. And I remember one day that I thought I had made it. I'm tying my cleats up. And I look up, Coach Wallace is walking toward me. He comes over and he puts his hand on my shoulder. And he says, Hearn, son, those holes in your clothes, those holes in your shoes, that bologna sandwich is not an indication of the man you're going to become, son. He said, Hearn, you can be anything you want to be. It's a journey, son. You can be anything you want to be. Me, coach? Yeah, you. Just months early in that elementary school, I was ready to drop out. I was done with the embarrassment. I'd had enough. And if you know anything about education, you know you don't drop out when you turn 18 years old. You drop out in elementary school. You drop out emotionally. You drop out physically. You drop out mentally. That's where I was at. But now, because the life impact and transformational things he's doing and saying with me, I had a dream. I turned that dream into a goal that became my mission in life. At age 13, and my family would tell you, at age 13, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be a science teacher and a football coach, and nothing from that time would stop me from achieving that goal because somebody believed in me. I started making A's and B's in junior high school. I transitioned to high school, made the honor roll, straight A's. I graduated from high school and received an academic athletic scholarship to college. I graduated from college in 4 years, and I went back to West Texas, and I taught science and I coached football for 35 years in the public school system simply because one man gave me something to believe in that was bigger than I was, a man who empowered me to do great things without him. And if he had been in the Rotary, you better believe I would have joined. 10 of those years was spent at Permian High School, and I don't have to tell you that story, but I'm going to tell you that because the time that I was there was the best times in the history of that school. Those 10 years that I served there were the best time. We won more football games than anybody else in the state of Texas. 122, 11, and 6. They named us Team of the Decade, 6 state championships, 2 national championships. The last state championship, and I'm going to call it the last, because they hadn't won one since I left. They asked me to be a principal at the school, at Permian. My second year as a principal at Permian High School, they named me the outstanding principal of Region 18, which covered 20 counties, and they sent me to Austin, Texas to accept the award from the governor. During my time in Austin, Texas, they decided that they were going to write an article about me being named outstanding principal of Region 18. Oh, the local newspaper. The article is about this big. You can't make this up. This is flat out the truth. You see it. The article is this big. They put it on the very back page between the want ad it and the obituary sections. 2 weeks after I returned from Austin, Texas, my secretary, Mrs. Alice Mosley, she walks into my office and she announces, Mr. Hearn, you have a visitor. I was doing some things. I didn't look up. I thought it was a student or a teacher, and I said, Miss Mosley, please, just send them in. After a few seconds, I look up. I feel this presence over me, and I look up, and it's Coach Wallace. But he's not Coach Wallace anymore. He is the superintendent of that school district that I graduated from. The man who transformed me, the man who saved my life, the man who I am trying to emulate at that very moment is standing in front of me. So I'm overcome with emotion, and I jump up and I stick my hand across the desk for him to shake my hand. But he won't shake it. He won't take my hand. He walks around the desk and he hugs me. He hugged me. And I'll never forget what he said that day. He said, Hearn, I read about you in the paper. And I said, Coach, you had to play CSI to find that article. He just smiled. And then he said, Hearn, we have been, Jan and I, that's his wife's name, Jan and I have been following your career since you graduated from high school, son. And he said, you have been doing some amazing things. And I just wanted to come by and tell you, superintendent now, I just wanted to come by and tell you how proud we are of you. And then he said it. But Hearn, sir, I knew you would do this. Looking in his eyes and hearing those words, it transported me back to that 7th grade football player all over again that day. And it came like a flood. I began to weep. I cried. I couldn't stop crying. I had to sit down. It was the most embarrassing thing that a grown man can do in front of his old coach that has ever happened to me in my whole entire life. I couldn't stop crying. I had to sit down, and he sat down across from me. He watched me cry, and he sit there and smile. You know, you hear all this stuff from these young folks running around wet behind the ears and tell you grown men don't cry. You know, the older I get, the more I cry. Why do I cry? I remember the journey. I remember the journey. I know what brought me here. I know why I'm standing on this stage today talking to you, because I remember the journey. Good folks, good men, good women who have pushed me, believed in me, supported me, and told me over and over and over again, you can do it. I remember the journey. He sat in that office with me for an hour and a half, the superintendent. He's telling me the things that he saw in me. I had a chance to ask him, Coach, what did you mean? You knew I was doing this. He said, son, you were like a sponge. You were soaking it up. And we were just so happy to be there. You know what he was doing? He was still showing me how to walk out his legacy. Like I said, my wife and I, we travel all over these United States. We're Zig Ziglar coach trainers. We're also Cornell University certified DE&I facilitator. That's why Peter had asked me to do this. And when we started this, that Friday Night Light thing was big, and I would get there and they would introduce me, and they want to have questions about that Friday Night Lights thing. And on the way back on the flight, my wife looked at me and she said, "Baby, you need to write a book." I wrote that book and I released that book 2014 in February. My classmates back in that small West Texas town I grew up in, they got wind of it, so they invited me back for a class reunion and a book signing. They took me, they set me in the foyer area, they put the books beside me, they stuffed the Sharpie in my hand, and I would sign books as they came up and reminisced about old times. I'm signing a book for a former classmates, and I'm talking to them, and out of the peripheral of my eye, of my vision, I see a figure. I give my classmate the book, and I look over, oh, it's Coach Wallace. But he, once again, he's not Coach Wallace. He's not even superintendent anymore. He's retired. He's living on a ranch that's 4.5 hours from that very spot that he's standing on, but he's standing there again. I spring up. He comes up, he picks the book up, he looks at the book, he looks at me and said, "Hearn, son, did you write this?" "Yes, sir, Coach, every single word." And he looks at the book, he looks at me, he said, "Hearn, son, by golly, I knew you'd do this." What am I doing? I'm crying. And here comes Callie taking pictures and giving Kleenexes out. He is 75 years old in that picture. Talking about building and maintaining relationships. You're talking about a legacy. You're talking about somebody, his words matches his actions. I can't move, I'm sorry. I didn't see him for a while. And I got worried. So I decided that I needed to go see him on his ranch. I needed to go shake his hand, look him in his eye, tell him that I loved him, and thank you for saving my life. Thank you. So I made that trip, that 5.5 hours, 4.5 hours, make that trip. I was just going to go down and shake his hand, say I love you and thank you. They kept me, he and his wife, for 2.5 days. And this is what he said. He said, now, I said, "Coach, I'm not prepared." He said, "Oh, we'll go to Walmart. I'll get some underwear, t-shirts, and flip-flops, and a t-shirt, and some shorts." That's when you know they cared, right? 2.5 days. That's a picture, me on his ranch at his home. In December, he sent this. He's learning how to text. He sent that text at 83 years old. What is he doing? He is still maintaining that relationship that he built with that 13-year-old kid 56 years ago. Zig Ziglar said, "We are conditioned to believe much more of what we see than what we hear." So the eyes are the windows to the soul. The eyes are the one sensory organ we have that is directly connected to the brain. So logically, we're going to believe much more of what we see than what we hear. But we have to consider this. We are inspired, motivated, and moved to take action on what we hear. Why is that? That's because the feeling brain is 10 times larger than the thinking brain. In essence, what Mr. Ziglar is saying is this: when what you do matches what you say, you're going to be very successful at recruiting new and diverse members to the Rotary. Why? Because what you do matches what you say. That means you have the ability to build and maintain intentional, positive relationships. And having the ability to build and maintain intentional, positive relationships means that people trust you. And trust is all about character, and character is about honesty and integrity. And good character is about living and leaving an intentional, positive legacy. The best recruiting tool that Rotary has is you and how you live your life. You have that unconscious influence. And what do I mean by that? Somebody is always watching you. And you don't know who, you don't know where, and you don't know when they're watching. But I can guarantee you somebody is always watching you. This is simply all I'm saying. You must be intentional about the legacy you choose to leave. Why? Because it can change a life. It can transform an organization. It can inspire a nation to change. That's how powerful your legacy is. And living and leaving an intentional positive legacy and building and maintaining intentional positive relationships simply to recruit new and diverse members to the Rotary is simply a choice.
Thank you, Dr. Hearn. Thank you for that powerful message. Now, do you see, after hearing that, why I said you have to come speak to our Rotary Club? Dr. Hearn, it is a tradition of our club to donate a library book in honor of your speech today. A copy of the book plate that will go in that book is in this bag. Thank you. Thank you very much.